Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if the Soviet Union won the Polish-Soviet War. The Polish-Soviet War was one of the most important wars in the interwar period. Poland was just getting independent and the Soviet Union was gaining more and more control over their territories. The Soviet Union wanted to retake all the possessions that used to belong to the Russian Empire, while Poland wanted to get as much as possible, but also not too much. The Polish leaders at the time were fighting over different ideas and identities that Poland should have. There was the idea of an ethno-state, which would result in a smaller Poland, but a Poland that would have only Polish people within the borders. And there was also the other idea of a Międzymorze, where we would have a bigger Poland with smaller satellite states. And then, of course, some circles, they went as far as saying that the Commonwealth needs to be re-established. At the end, we got a Poland that was something in between all of those. Like it wanted to head towards the territories that used to belong to the Commonwealth. Even nowadays capital Vilnius or Wilno became part of Poland. But at the same time, this Poland was much smaller than anticipated, although still a very big Poland, and it also had like a lot of Polish people already within the borders, but still with some minorities at the same time, especially the Ukrainians and the Belarusians, and Germans too. Well, the Poles, they reached Kiev, but they were beaten by the Red Army. They had to retreat until the Vistula River. The Polish forces won the life-changing Battle of Warsaw in 1920, and this battle is very often cited as one of the most important battles in history. The Polish victory stopped the spread of communism into Europe, it led to a small defeat of the World Revolution, and the goal of exporting communism to Germany failed. Europe had been saved from communism thanks to Poland. But what if all of that changed? What if the Soviet Union won the Polish-Soviet War? The point of divergence in this scenario is that the Polish army doesn't follow through with Piłsudski's plan. Or we could also, as an alternative, propose a scenario that the Polish army is not able to break Russian ciphers, which they didn't in September 1919. In OTL, but then afterwards they actually did break it in October 1919. The Soviet victory wouldn't be a glorious one, no. The cost of it would be immense. Because the Poles, they are first of all known to rebel very often once they are under foreign rule. So probably even with the invasions, we would see Polish cities rising up and trying to defeat or to somehow put some damage to the Red Army. The next thing we could see is that the Baltic states, they would be swallowed and gobbled up. The Baltic states would not be able to survive on their own once Poland is taken by the Soviets. However, after the Soviets may stop for a while, because there is a civil war. There used to be a much bigger civil war, of course, but the civil war would still be ongoing. Coupled with a war of expansion is very draining, isn't it? The Bolsheviks, they promised peace after all, and people may at one point get fed up and call them out as liars. And since Lenin and his followers weren't dumb people, yes, you can have different opinions about them, but they were not dumb, they would know when to stop or make at least a little pause to give people some crumbles. They would know that they would have to switch some tactics. The USSR would still need to strengthen the former Russian Tsarist territories. One of the first goals to re-establish control over the Tsarist Russian territories would almost be done. We would also still see clashes between Romania, Czechoslovakia and Hungary, and Finland too would see an offensive from the Soviets and perhaps even be taken. With Germany, the Soviets would also still have their problems. See, the Soviets, they won't just roll in and take everything one by one just by beating Poland. Their supply lines, they were already overstretched. The men, they were tired. There wasn't enough equipment. And the Soviets would know that the Entente may even come to Germany's aid. And as a result, the promise of no war would have been broken. After a few more years, the Soviets would try to solidify their grasp over the conquered lands, and someone like Trotsky would make plans of supporting communists outside of the Soviet Union. With the victory over Poland and an end of the war on Soviet terms, the idea of the World Revolution would still exist, and as a result, something like socialism in one country or Stalinism would be butterflied away. Now, I'm not saying that Stalin would be butterflied away as a leader, but these principles of socialism in one country, it would just not happen. The Entente would probably not just stay around and do nothing, play with their thumbs, no. But they could also not just suddenly abolish the Treaty of Versailles. So the consequence would be that Germany could have a bigger army, that they were allowed to take certain parts back, which became Polish and are now Soviet. However, a union with Austria would still be a no-go. We may see soon enough another conflict arise, precisely over the former Polish, former German, now Soviet lands. And with the Soviet Union still being weak and not that industrialized, I don't see them holding these lands for a long time. One key aspect that may play in the favor of the Soviet Union would be that a huge number of Germans would be communists. They would disrupt Germany from within. Perhaps they would also disrupt other parts of Europe, but we could not see a full-going and full-blown revolution all over Western Europe. It would not happen. The Soviets, they could probably take some advantage because some lines, they would be totally destroyed, or we would have like some miscommunication, or there would be some sabotage from within, but that's pretty much it. People in Eastern Europe as well, they would grow tired of the constant warfare between countries that have nothing to lose over there. Like you have at one point Germans, you have at one point Russians, and the Poles, they would just dislike it. And communism as well would lose globally its appeal because of the association of constant warfare, something that is totally against the principle of supporting the worker. Germany would get some of their territories back, but this time they would demand more lands, a union with Austria, revisions of borders within Czechoslovakia, etc., and the Entente wouldn't be able to do much. They would initially agree to some phases of negotiations, and these negotiations, they would be going on, but the Entente would force Germany to recognize the Polish, Lithuanian, Czechoslovak and Austrian independence. A war between Germany and its neighbors wouldn't erupt immediately, but that's only because everybody would just be so tired of constant wars. But the diplomatic relations between the Germans and the neighbors would always be very sour. The Soviet Union would collapse in itself, and we would see a bunch of new states arise, which may have also limited war between each other. We could see a lot of chaotic scenarios going on within the former Soviet Union. The Caucasus, the Baltics, Belarus and Ukraine would gain independence for sure, and we may even see a chance of Międzymorze to exist if the Poles would really be angry with the Germans, especially about not having a corridor, or the Poles would be in another war against Ukraine and Belarus and even Lithuania, where they may come out as victorious, but Poland would then be totally isolated from the rest of the world. Russia would be a mess, but slowly improve. This time around, a nationalistic and revanchistic government could build up Russia, even industrialize it, and prepare for a comeback. Germany would be at odds with Poland, with France, and dream with an union with Austria, while France and Britain would have difficulties to estimate how the world would develop in the coming years. A Soviet victory would not mean that the Soviet Union will take over all of Europe and that you have a socialist or communist revolution going on in Germany and that everybody will stick with the Soviets. But a Soviet victory in Poland will, first of all, overstretch the Soviet Union, give them a short-term success, but at the end of the day, the Germans, after having more favorable terms under the Treaty of Versailles, would take back, quote-unquote, what would be rightfully theirs, which would lead to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. Eastern Europe would suffer from the trauma, and we would have less people in Eastern Europe and a culture that would be very pessimistic about life. We would see paintings of darkness, we would see literature that just describes destruction, because constant warfare, extremism and death, that would be the everyday life of Eastern Europe for many, many years. But the positive aspect that I can add in here is that the Holodomor, which never happened, and perhaps with a successful Międzymorze, the countries between Germany and Russia would be able to protect their independence. An alternate World War II would be very local and almost exclusively be started by the revanchistic and nationalistic Russia, while a Weimarer Republic in Germany could be more popular than in OGL, leaving no chance for communists or Nazis to rise to power. And that's where we leave it for now. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.